Hook. Have you ever walked into a place where everyone seemed to belong, a broken bar except you? That was Daniel tonight, a man who came to a wedding as just a guest, holding a gift wrapped in gold paper and a heart wrapped in old wounds. He didn't know that before the night ended, a single dance would rewrite the story he'd stopped believing in. Daniel Carter stood quietly at the back of the crowded hall, watching lights shimmer off crystal chandeliers. The air was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the rhythm of love songs, but Daniel felt like he was listening from the outside. He hadn't attended a wedding in years. The last one he'd been to was his own, nearly a decade ago. Back then, he was a husband full of dreams and a father-to-be. Now, he was a single dad trying to hold together the little world he'd built for his daughter, Lily. He didn't want to come tonight, but his old college friend Mark had insisted. "You need to get out, man, it's been too long," Mark had said. So, here he was, sitting at a table meant for people he barely knew, nursing a glass of water while everyone else toasted champagne. His daughter, Lily, was at home with his sister. She'd made him promise to bring back a slice of wedding cake. "Don't forget the icing, Daddy," she'd said with her gap-toothed grin. That smiley, that little fascia was his whole reason for breathing. Since her mother, Claire, had passed away 5 years ago, Daniel had devoted every heartbeat to raising her. He worked double shifts, skipped holidays, and turned his grief into bedtime stories so she'd never feel his pain. The bride and groom entered, everyone cheered, and the music swelled. Daniel clapped politely, but his thoughts drifted far away back to Claire's laughter, her wedding dress, the way she'd spun in his arms under fairy lights. He could still feel her hand in his, still hear her whisper, "Promise me, you'll dance even when I'm gone." But he hadn't danced since. Not once. He stayed at his table, watching others move to the music. Mark came over, loosening his tie. "You look like a statue, Danny. Go dance. Life's too short to stand still." Danielle smiled faintly. "I forgot how." That's when he saw her. Across the dance floor, in a soft blue dress, stood a woman with auburn hair tied loosely and eyes that caught the light like morning dew. She wasn't the bride. She wasn't even dancing. She stood near the edge, watching others, her expression half wistful, half searching, just like his. Their eyes met for a heartbeat too long. She smiled, not politely, but warmly, as if she saw something familiar in him. Daniel looked away quickly. His heart thumped in a way it hadn't for years. Later, during dinner, she sat 2 seats away. Her name was Sophie Hart, a teacher, gentle-voiced and kind-eyed. She was the bride's cousin. They talked lightly at first about the food, the music, the chaos of weddings. Then, somehow, about deeper things. She told him about her brother's death, how she'd raised her niece since then. He told her about Lily, about losing Claire. For a while, the world around them disappeared. When the music turned slow again, couples moved to the floor. Sophie looked at him, smiled softly, and said, "You know, a broken bar you can't hide from life forever." He chuckled awkwardly. "Who says I'm hiding?" She tilted her head. "Your eyes do." Then the moment stretched. She reached her hand across the table, eyes gleaming with something unspoken, and said quietly, "Dance with me." Daniel froze. The same words Claire had once whispered. His breath caught. For a second, he thought he might walk away, but something in Sophie's eyes stopped him. He took her hand. The music wrapped around them as they moved to the center. His steps were uncertain at first, like a man walking into the past, but Sophie guided him gently, smiling as if she understood every hesitation. And slowly, something inside him began to melt. He hadn't felt warmth like this in years, the kind that didn't just touch your skin, but your soul. When the song ended, she leaned in and whispered, "See, you still remember how?" Daniel laughed softly, his heart both aching and alive. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a guest in life. He felt present. But what neither of them knew was that this one dance was only the beginning of, because the next morning, Daniel would receive a phone call that would test everything he'd begun to feel again. Daniel woke up the next morning to his phone ringing. It was Sophie. Her voice trembled. "Danielle, a broken bar. It's about Lily." His heart stopped. What happened? Lily had fallen while playing in the yard and was taken to the hospital. Daniel rushed there, fear pounding in his chest. He found her in a hospital bed, her little arm in a cast but smiling bravely. "I'm okay, Daddy. I just tripped." Sophie stood outside the room. She'd driven there after hearing from Mark. Somehow, in just one night, she'd become part of Daniel's world. She brought flowers for Lily, helped fill out forms, and stayed by their side. In those long hospital hours, something deeper bloomed, not out of romance, but out of care. Sophie didn't just see Daniel, she saw his pain, his patience, and the love he carried like armor. Over the next few weeks, Sophie began visiting often, sometimes to bring Lily storybooks, sometimes to just talk. Lily adored her. They painted, laughed, and made paper crowns. Daniel watched quietly, his heart torn between gratitude and fear. He didn't want to lose control again. He'd buried his heart once. Could he risk it twice? One evening, after dinner, Sophie stayed back. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching a paper heart she made that said, "For Daddy and Miss Sophie." They both smiled at it, and then silence filled the room. Sophie looked at him. "You don't have to do this alone, Daniel. You've been carrying everything on your own shoulders. It's okay to let someone in." He swallowed hard. "Every time I let someone in, I lose them." She shook her head gently. "Not this time." He looked into her eyes and saw not replacement, but renewal, the kind of love that doesn't erase old scars but honors them. Weeks turned into months. Daniel and Sophie grew closer, but not through grand gestures, through small moments. Breakfasts shared, school drop-offs, movie nights with Lily between them on the couch. It wasn't just healing, it was home returning in a new form. One day, at another wedding of this time, a small family only, Daniel stood in the crowd again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Sophie stood beside him, Lily holding both their hands. As the music began, Sophie turned to him, smiled that same soft smile, and whispered again, "Dance with me." Daniel looked down at Lily, who giggled. "Go on, Daddy." And for the first time in a long time, Daniel didn't hesitate. He took Sophie's hand, stepped onto the light, and danced this time, not for the past, but for the future. As they spun under the lights, Daniel looked at her and whispered, "Thank you, a broken bar, for reminding me that life doesn't end up, it just waits for us to begin again." The music swelled, and the camera of life captured the moment of the widowed father, the woman who healed his silence, and the little girl who made love whole again. And maybe that's the real message. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from moving on. It comes from allowing someone to take your hand and remind you, a broken bar, that you're still meant to dance.